Marc, thanks so much for sitting down with me. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
You're now part of Corteva, I should say. Sorry, Corteva, very important. Which is, maybe you can explain better than me.
Yeah, well, Corteva is the combination, really, Dow and DuPont came together as companies, which in the ag space put together three agricultural focused companies, DuPont Pioneer, DuPont itself in crop protection, and then Dow in both crop protection and seeds. Those three organizations within Dow DuPont have formed a separate division, which is called Corteva AgriscienceTM, as an ag division of Dow DuPont. And so our integration, which is happening right now, is going really well. We're extremely pleased with how the teams have come together, how we're working together to provide ongoing innovation for farmers, how we've set up an organizational structure as well as leadership teams. We've also established the brand or the name for the future company, which is the Corteva name. It's now a brand within Dow DuPont. Soon it will be a separate company name. We've also established a couple of additional seed brands. Brevant here in Europe would be one. And then Pioneer, of course, as our flagship legacy brand still exists. But we're really excited how those teams are going together, how we're together working towards our intended spin in June 2019, when the company will stand alone. And at that point, will be the beginning point for what we're doing. In the meantime, obviously, we still commit to providing innovation to farmers and consumers around the world.
Good luck with that. Yeah, look forward to the spin-off.
We do too.
Yeah. So some exciting innovations in the pipeline. Can you share some of those?
That's really the fun part, obviously. So that's where our commitment becomes real and becomes practical, and where we can keep the promises that we've made. So a couple of things in Europe specifically. So on the seed treatment side, which is a big focus for us in Europe, that's obviously an important area to try to reduce generally the application of pesticides, if you can do so rather than over-the-top foliar applications through seed treatment applications. That makes a lot of sense. We have a number of new products that we're launching in Europe, one of which is Lumiposa, which is an insecticide, a seed-applied insecticide in winter oilseed rape, registered in a couple of countries in Europe, and we have great expectations for that, also to expand further in Europe. There's other products like Lumivia, Lumisena, some other fungicide products. So that's really exciting. Also in Europe, we have a program called M3 silage corn, which is a program intended to develop higher yielding corn hybrids that also include higher digestible starch. So we can increase the milk per hectare, or milk per kilo, or per metric ton. Exciting developments. In sunflowers, which is of course big and important in Europe, we have a number of current commercial high oleic sunflower hybrids. We've recently invested in a new technology center here in Spain, in Sevilla. So that's exciting and appropriate for where the meeting is. ProPound is an activity that we're working on very hard in Europe. Not sure if you've heard of this, but that's an effort to increase protein production in Europe rather than imports of protein products into Europe, something that is, from a political standpoint, very much supported and very much needed. So we have a higher protein rapeseed that we're developing that will meet those requirements. And then, of course, the big thing is gene editing, CRISPR-Cas. That for us is one of our many tools that we can apply towards plant breeding. We find that we can actually mine or use a lot more of the existing native traits that occur naturally in species versus, the biotech paradigm of bringing a gene in from the outside. We can actually use genes and combinations of genes within the species. And CRISPR-Cas is a tool that allows you to make targeted variations in plants that allow then for further selection rather than rely on crossing, selection, or induced random mutagenesis. So that's a really exciting area that, despite the current political landscape, we're still very committed to from a technology standpoint, and which the farmers need.
I'll come back to the CRISPR-Cas in a bit. I wanted to briefly touch base on the propound, because that's something that would, in my view, very much fit into the EU protein plan, right?
Yeah, exactly, precisely.
Yeah.
And that's what it's geared for, indeed. Can we, rather than rely in Europe on imports of soybean products, is there a way to economically and sustainably produce those in Europe? And oilseed rape as a well-adapted crop in Europe with a higher protein content and different protein structure, is that something that would be possible to use as a protein enhancer in Europe? And the answer, we think, is yes. And so we have a program geared towards that.
We've been talking about innovation now, but on the flip side, we are also seeing a lot of opposition against innovation. And I'm really looking for ways on how to turn the tide on that. Do you have any smart pointers there?
Yeah. Well, I actually don't think that there's resistance to innovation. I think there's a misunderstanding of innovation amongst both society and politicians. And really, we need to look inward first. We have, as a seed industry, always pushed very hard on innovation, always focused on providing solutions for farmers, and then further downstream, all the way down to consumers. Another big focus area, by the way, for Corteva versus just old-fashioned looking at farmers. We want to enrich the lives of consumers as well. But while we do that, we've forgotten in the history, as an industry, we've forgotten to communicate with consumers. And I really believe that there is acceptance of innovation amongst consumers, and that will drive political direction and will. But in order to achieve that, we must be more transparent as an industry. We must build trust, build respect, build understanding. We must expose ourselves a little and be willing to talk about the pluses and minuses of all technologies and all systems in agriculture. We must acknowledge that agriculture has a big impact on the environment. So what can we do together to not blame anyone about that per se, but rather work on systems with our current knowledge to improve that? And I really believe that if we do a better job of communications in a transparent way with society at large, we'll build back that trust, and that will allow us to then better explain why what we're doing that we know provides innovation for farmers. It's a matter of communicating that now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. Another part where this touches upon is plant breeding innovation, and you mentioned CRISPR-Cas. There are several other types of plant breeding innovation out there. And unfortunately, in July this year, the European Court of Justice decided that all products of plant breeding innovation are to be regulated as GMOs. What's your take on that decision?
Yeah, so we're obviously disappointed in that for the reasons I just mentioned. I think that that's a manifestation, really, especially in Europe, of the misunderstanding of science and innovation and what farmers need to be successful. Another element to that is that the general public is very far nowadays removed in the Western world from farming. So just a very a large lack of understanding of what farmers are. And chemical applications, either through seed treatment or foliar, is part of the process, and breeding is part of the process. And from our perspective, what better way to create an improved product that works in the current environment for the future with sustainable production practices in mind, feeding more people with less resources, et cetera. What better way than using genetics and breeding and biology as a way to deliver that innovation? In Europe, that link has not been communicated well. We believe that the way around perhaps this European Court of Justice ruling is just an ongoing communications plan in Europe, focused on a lot of stakeholders, consumers none the least. And there's a lot of consumers in Europe and a lot of consumers in the world, so that's a tall effort, but it's necessary. We together as an industry must come together and tell that story. I have a perhaps somewhat naive belief that what is right in the end will come out. So I don't believe this is the end state in Europe. Europe has been very innovation unfriendly and technology unfriendly, as we all know, unfortunately, for a long time. But as impact on the environment and as the need for food production, we mentioned the protein production, as that becomes more important, I think we can turn a corner and start talking about how we together can provide innovation to help European consumers.
Yeah.
At that point, the political will then also turns, and then that's kind of changes makes a new environment, hopefully.
Yeah. We're here at the ESA Annual meeting in Madrid, but with nowadays modern technology of teleconferencing, video conferencing, Skype, you name it, we could meet all our clients via Skype and so on. Why is it still so important to come together in person to a meeting?
Well, we meet our clients on Skype and video call and phone call and email every day, every hour.
Okay.
But in addition to that, it's really important for us as a company to be represented here at such a meeting. And really it's because, especially in Europe, we've talked a little bit about CRISPR and about gene editing and about the environment for innovation here. It's really important that we as an industry come together, sort things out together. We as a company want to add our voice to the European seed industry efforts. We want to be part of that discussion. We want to listen and hear what the European industry and stakeholders say. And we really want to contribute to building and supporting an innovation framework that would be something that will benefit all of us in the future. And being here in person, eye to eye, face to face is obviously one of the best ways of doing so. So we very much enjoy being here, and we enjoy being part of this discussion, and hope that the discussion leads down the right path.
Excellent. Thank you, Marc.
Thank you, Marcel. Good to see you.